This is not a moment, this is a movement, and we are here today to continue the work of Martin and Coretta Scott King to say that the unfinished business of the civil rights movement has not been forgotten. A little known fact is that Coretta Scott King in the mid to late 70s led 1.2 million people across this country in demonstrations for full employment. Demonstrations just like this, often at Federal Reserve banks all across the nation. It is thanks to her work and her awe-inspiring commitment that efforts that resulted in the Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment Act, which was passed in 1978. But the bill fell short of achieving its goal. Instead of guaranteeing full employment to all as a right, the legislation endowed the Federal Reserve with a dual mandate, not to eliminate unemployment, but to minimize unemployment. It was assumed by policymakers that involuntary unemployment could not be abolished because the Fed had to balance attempts to fight unemployment with concerns about inflation. The belief was that it was not possible to have full employment and price stability, and that Congress could not be made responsible for ensuring employment for every American that wanted a dignified job. But today, generations later, thanks to the efforts of many great and public-spirited economists, we know that this is simply not true.
In the United States, we are talking about legislation that will establish a fully federally funded, locally driven program committing the U.S. government to guaranteeing a living wage job with good benefits, including health care, to anyone who wants or needs it.
What we know now is that Congress and not the Fed can absolutely be made responsible for ensuring that there is full employment in America. We have been told our entire lives that there is no money to attend to our deeply held and brutally neglected public priorities. They tell us all the time, we'd love to pay for quality public schools for your children, but there's not enough money in the budget, and you know money does not grow on trees. The fact of the matter is that creating money is easier than growing trees. If money grew on trees, you'd have to plant the trees, wait years for them to grow, and then harvest the money when it was ripe. It turns out that growing money on trees is actually harder and more of a nuisance than it is for the federal government to actually create money. When it comes to creating money for public priorities, the federal government does not have to grow money on trees. All Congress has to do is authorize the Treasury to type in numbers into the computer system. It is that easy. If we want money for quality schools, for health care, for full employment, to address climate change, our greatest existential threat today, all it takes is for Congress to create the money for it the same way it does if we go to war. Thank God money doesn't grow on trees, because that would actually involve real difficulty. Because the federal government has the power of money creation, it cannot run short of dollars any more than a carpenter can run out of inches or a scorekeeper can run out of points.
As I heard President Obama say in an ABC town hall meeting, he said, "You have impoverished communities that have been stripped away of opportunity, where children are born into abject poverty. And if our society really wanted to solve the problem, we could. It's just that it would require everybody's say, this is important. This is significant."
So whenever it comes to funding the things that we care about, our elected officials pretend that we can't afford it. They use scare tactics like talking about ballooning federal debts and the budget deficits, and they show you this huge $22 trillion debt clock to tell us that if we continue to spend, the sky is going to fall and we're kicking the can down the road for our children and our grandchildren. But it's all a lie. Because whenever the donor class wants something, they simply go to our government, ask for it, and Congress opens up the faucet of money creation. War, tax cuts for the rich and corporations, subsidies for oil corporations, and all of a sudden the magic wand of money creation is suddenly waved to create trillions of dollars through deficit spending to give the special interests what they want. If we utilize the power of money creation for purposes in the public interest, we would no longer be desperate and dependent upon the crumbs that they throw at us from their table. If we used our power to provide health care for every American, not provide health insurance, but guaranteed single-payer health care, then we wouldn't have to pay for private insurance premiums, putting billions of dollars in premiums and co-pays and deductibles into the pockets of the insurance companies. It wouldn't be very profitable for the insurance companies now if we did all of that. While they tell us money creation for public priorities is irresponsible, that it will cause inflation, the financial sector creates an abundance of money whenever they make loans.
The jobs guarantee exists to meet us where we're at. It exists to be catered to our needs and our skills and train us, and we will train each other. Because as we're learning from places like Jackson, Mississippi, we can experiment with new forms of production. We can experiment with cooperatives. We can experiment with new forms of communities coming together to produce value, to produce social and environmental value. And that is the beauty of what we can offer. That is the beauty of the alternative that we are here to present, and we are here to hold institutions like these accountable with. And lastly, we will not be tricked into thinking that our rights and our needs have to be held in opposition to the rights and needs of the rest of the world. We share more in common with our brothers and sisters around the world than we do with the elites in this country here. At the beginning of this struggle begins here today with our money, because it's our money. Our money.
This government has to be the employer of last resort. It must employ all of its citizens, and guess what? The money's there. They don't ask where we're going to get the money when we want to bomb somebody. They don't ask where's the money when we went to Iraq and Afghanistan. They didn't ask where's the money when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What we know for sure is that America has the money, and we wanted to release the money into this economy so that jobs will flow, so that income will flow, so that power will flow, because the power is not up top, but the power is in the people. The power is not just in Washington, but the power is in the bodies of persons who showed up today to say, America, you're gonna be who you say you are on paper.
When they tell you they'd love for your kids to have quality schools and tuition-free public college, but we just can't afford them, just tell them no more excuses. When they tell you we'd love to have a federal job guarantee, but the money is not there, tell them no more excuses. When they tell us that we'd love to have Medicare for all, but we're worried about crushing the economy, tell them no more excuses. When they tell us we'd love to have a Green New Deal and prevent the destruction of the environment, but it's just unrealistic, tell them. We've come here today to declare that if we change the way we think about money, we can literally change the world. We've had this idea beaten into our heads for 50 years that public spending is an insult to human dignity because it involves redistributing money from the makers to the takers, that the dignity of self-reliance requires us to shun public spending. But nothing could be further from the truth. Public spending at the federal level should not be seen as redistributing already existing money from the makers and giving it to the takers. The federal government has the power to create all the money that we need to address all of our deepest issues. What they don't want you to know is that when we do public spending, that is our money. So we are free to spend our money for our needs. What do we want? Jobs. When do we want them? What do we want? When do we want it? Our money. Our money. Our money. Jobs, not war. Jobs, not war. Jobs, not war. Jobs, not war.